Testing. Miss Schattman, where are you? Miss Schattman, where are you?
Perry wanted to invite his political friends, Kenny Sutherland, who was the Democratic district leader, Phil Kleinfeld, who later became a judge, and Bungard, who was the state assemblyman. We were going to have a big synagogue wedding, followed by a catered affair with dancing and very good food and many, many people. But fate had a different something in store for us. Our wedding was to be March the 4th, and my sister Mamie, who was taken sick in the hospital, died, and her funeral was February 23rd. Well, how could we have a wedding right on top of the funeral with my father sick in bed? Perry's mother was a very bright lady, one of the old school, and she came up and she said, "It's not good, it's not lucky to postpone a wedding. We must have the wedding." And so we had the wedding right at the bedside of my sick father. Only my mother and father were present. Perry's older sister, Molly, and her husband were there. I guess Faye was there. And that was all there was to the wedding. And all my life I regretted a little bit never having had a really bing-up, dancing, bright wedding. I felt we owed it to us. I still have the wedding invitation printed on copper, which we later turned into an ashtray. I think one of the children will have it. After the wedding, since we had made no other plans, I moved in with Perry into his mother's house on Mermaid Avenue in Coney Island, Brooklyn, and we occupied Perry's apartment. I kept on teaching school until the summer. After the summer, we found a little house on 64th Street. It was for 10 years, which was simply wonderful. The house cost us $10,000, and we had a tenant upstairs who paid us $70 a month for rent, which brought our rent down to only $30 a month. We lived there from 1924 until 1934. The school was only a few blocks away, and so the children could start school there. The house consisted of a front porch, a den, a living room, a dining room, a dinette, a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bath. We really enjoyed, and a garden in the back. We really enjoyed that house very much. While we lived there, they were remodeling the Coney Island boardwalk, and Kenny sent many, many jobs to Perry for plans. And if Perry couldn't do them himself, he got Dewey Rothkrug and his friend Joe Goldberg, who were also engineers, to help him with the plans. Every time I had a child, Perry got a job which netted us $1,000, which was very, very nice. After 10 years of living there, the Depression came. We had paid off the mortgages up to about $5,000, and it was time for us to move on. And I went out scouting for a house at Perry's direction, We still had to stay within the bounds of Kenny's domain. But I found a lovely house on East 26th Street, on the school block, not too far from the bus, not too far from the subway station, and in 1926, I'm now going to record life on 64th Street. We had a neighbor, Mrs. Carp, who had a little daughter whose name was Irene. She was about the same age as Arthur at that time, which may have been 4 years old. And she had a doll and a doll carriage. And Arthur wanted that doll and doll carriage. So he grabbed the doll and he would shake it. And Irene would run into her mother and she would cry. And her mother would come out and say, "My daughter can't play with your son anymore because he's too fresh." So I went out and bought Arthur a doll and a doll carriage. As soon as he had the doll and doll carriage, after a day, he was no longer interested in it. One day, Irene said to Arthur, I came from Macy's. My mommy bought me in Macy's." And Arthur said, "Oh no, my mommy said I came from her belly." And Irene ran into her mother and she said, "Arthur said he came from his belly and he doesn't believe I came from Macy's." And the mother came out and she said to me, "Irene can't play with Arthur anymore. He's a dirty little boy." So that was one of the incidents on 64th Street. One day, Bobby, George, and Arthur were playing together, and I gave them each a quarter to go round the corner and go to the toy store and pick out any toy they wanted. And so they went around the corner, and they, on their little tricycles, and then they came back, and what do you think they brought? They brought water guns, and they went right to the garden hose. They filled up the guns with water, and they started having a fight. And of course, the three of them were drenched by the time I caught them, and turned off the garden hose and took away the water guns. These were some of the small incidents that happened when we lived on 64th Street. Now to go to 26th Street. We moved in there, and we bought all new furniture. I got an interior decorator. We gave away all the old furniture which we had used for the 10 years that we lived on 64th Street. And I picked out what I wanted, and Perry insisted that the decorator had to give her okay. We turned the sun parlor into an office for Perry. Later on, the sun parlor became the maid's sleep-in room. Then we had the dining room. We turned that into a living room. And we had a breakfast room right opposite the kitchen. And we had 2 bedrooms and a bath. Life there was very easy. And I had a maid. At that time, the sleep-in maid got $20 a month. And I told her when she learned how to cook, she would get $30 a month. And the first month, she got the $30 because she really knew how to cook. She was a young girl from Pennsylvania, from the coal mines, and they were very poor, and they had to send their children out to work. She must have been 16 or 17 at that time, a lovely white girl, and she stayed with me for 7 years and to help me bring up the children. She was Anna. I used to take the children down to the Little Red Schoolhouse on 3rd Street in Manhattan, and my sisters Dolly and Flora would bring their children down and meet me there at 12 o'clock when all the music lessons were over. Arthur and Richard took music lessons there, and while I was waiting for them, the head of the music department didn't want the mothers to sit around doing nothing, so she would play the Philharmonic for us that was going to be played on Sunday at that time at the Opera House. And on Sunday, I would take sheet of paper home that she had given us. I'd turn on the Philharmonic and play the themes for the children. Arthur and Richard would be on the floor in the living room reading the funnies, the Sunday funnies. And Anna would listen in. I don't know how much the children got out of it, but when Anna went downtown on her day off, she entered a contest for classical music. And who do you think won? She won the contest because she had been listening to the music all of the time. Then we had a basketball ring at the top of the garage. And all of the boys, as they grew up, would get together in our driveway and shoot for the basket and play ball there. One day, the basket went through one of our windows, and my sons knew that if they replaced it, they would not be punished for it. And so they got on their bikes, took the glass that was broken, went to a glazier, got a new piece of glass, bought some putty, put the glass back into the window, and that was the end of that story. Eddie Joachim lived right next door to us, and Arthur and Eddie became very good friends. And to this day, Eddie, who's a lawyer, is Arthur's lawyer and Richard's lawyer, and they're very, very good friends. Arthur belonged to a group called the Mid-Sens, because we belonged to a temple called the Mid-Sen Temple on Ocean Avenue, with Rabbi Halpin as our rabbi. Well, the Mid-Sens wanted a place to meet, and they went to Rabbi Halpin, and Arthur was the spokesman because we were members, and he said that the club would like to meet at the temple. And Rabbi Halpin said, oh no, they couldn't have that. And so Arthur said, well, you know, the church on Avenue K is perfectly happy to have us come there and meet there, because we have some of their church members in our group. Do you want us all to go to church, or do you want them to come to the temple? Halpin said, I'll think it over, and then he said, you can come here. And so they became the Mid-Sens and always met at the Midwood Jewish Center. Arthur went to Hebrew school there. Richard went to Hebrew school there. And they were bar mitzvahs in the temple. And Arthur and Richard wanted to be married by Rabbi Halpin, but Rabbi Halpin at that time was committed to another affair. So when Arthur got married to Judy, they had to get a different rabbi. And Arthur never forgave Rabbi Halpin, who happened to be a very brilliant rabbi and who's now dead. Arthur and Richard went to PS 193 on Avenue L and Bedford Avenue. And Mr. Goldstein was the principal, and he became a friend of mine. I was the president of the Parents Teachers Association, and through our offices and Perry's influence, we were able to put a library in the school. We have a plaque on the door of that library. I bet it's still there. It says, presented to the school by the Parent Teacher Association, Mrs. Perry Winston, President. Some of the teachers in that school were very anti-Semitic, and they would teach the new work on the high holy days, and therefore all the Jewish children would miss the new work and fall behind. And so I went in and had a talk with one of the teachers and explained to her that if she persisted in that kind of work, she would soon be transferred out of that school. Mrs. Salwin lived across the street from us, and she would go in and be a substitute teacher sometimes. And finally, Arthur said to me, well, Mrs. Salwin can be a teacher, and you keep on talking about being a teacher. How is it you never teach there? So I called Mr. Goldstein, and I said I would like to be a substitute there. I explained what happened, and he said, of course you can come. If not you, who? And so I substituted there for a few days, just to prove to my children that I had been a teacher. One day Arthur said something to me about diplomas. we never see your diploma. You say you went to so many schools. So I took him down the basement where I had about 20 certificates from Columbia, from every school imaginable, and from all the places that I had been taking lessons and attending classes, because I was never tired of learning. In 1929, we rented a small bungalow in the west end of Long Beach, right near the beach. And that was the year of the Depression. We enjoyed the beach very much, and I made some friends there. And the children went to a camp, a day camp, when they were a little older. I gave the children an allowance of 25 cents a week, and also they could have ice cream from the refrigerator any time they wanted. Well, all the children would come to their parents when the good humor man came around and rang the bell and say they wanted ice cream, and bother the parents. My children knew they could either have the money that I had given them, or they could go home and buy their ice cream, or they could go home and take the ice cream out of the freezer. Well, they thought about it, and they preferred to keep the money and go home and take the ice cream rather than buy the ice cream cones on the beach. The next year was 1930, the year after the Depression, or the Depression was still on. And we decided that we liked Long Beach so much for the summers, because Perry was able to commute every day, that we went and bought a house on Michigan Street, 80 Michigan Street. And that consisted of 3 nice bedrooms, a live dining room, a closed-in porch, an inside shower, and an outside shower. It was during this period that there was an epidemic of infantile paralysis. When Perry came home from work, I would make him come in the back way, take off his clothes and hang them on the line, and take a shower on the back porch. Then he could first come into the house. But, how stupid could I be? We didn't have refrigeration at that time, but we did have an ice box. And the iceman would come in with a big cube of ice on his tongs, take out all the food from the upper part of the refrigerator, put the ice in, put the food back, and then go out and go into the next house. When I think back on that, I think how silly I could have been to let somebody like that come into my house and handle the food. We owned the bungalow until 1960 and used it until Perry died. Then I went to the country. But it was during this stretch that I met the Schaeffers, and we played bridge together, and we played golf together, and we went swimming together. We would she and I would swim pretty far out. I would take off my bathing suit and she would hold it, and I would swim in the nude. I'd put my bathing suit on and reverse it. She would take hers off. And we had a lot of fun. And at night we would get together and play bridge. During this, we would take Perry's vacation a month off, and we would travel. We traveled through the northern part of the United States and Canada for a month. And then Perry would go home, fly home, and I would come back slowly with the children. Every night, they had no tourist cottages at those times, but we would stay at somebody's home where they took tourists. It cost us all of $2 a night because there were 2 double beds, and Perry and I would sleep in one bed, and two boys would sleep in the other one. I would wrap one in the bottom sheet, wrap the other one in the top sheet, put their feet toward each other and their heads away from each other. And then during the day, we would get up and drive, and we'd stop at a Piggly Wiggly's at that time and buy some food, a can of salmon, some fresh tomatoes, lettuce, blueberries, anything that we felt like eating. And we would drive again until we came to the town pool, where we would stop. For about a quarter, we would get a locker and towels, and we'd get undressed in the locker, put on our bathing suits, go swimming in the pool, have a picnic lunch, and stay there until the heat of the day was over, when we would repack our car and drive on to the next place. We netted to maybe 300, never more than 300 miles a day. Some days we would stop at the town hotel and go in for a businessman's lunch, which was about $1.75 for lunch. We would get 2 lunches for the 4 of us, and it was really very adequate, and then have our picnic supper. Life was very good. We played golf on the way over. We played tennis on the way, and one year we went to the Canadian Rockies, Banff and Lake Louise. We stayed at a camp, and we had our cottage, and we had our food, fixed our food in the cottage. And the men went off fishing, and I haven't told you yet that Perry was a very good fisherman, and the boys began to like fishing. To this day, Richard still loves his fishing. And I would paint. I took them and made sure that they saw all the things that nature had given us. We went to all the national parks, Yellowstone, and we went to Canada. And the next year, and Perry would take them to all the man-made things like Anaconda Copper Mine. And we went to Mount Rainier. We went to California. The next year, we went the southern route. We went to Mexico, and we spent our time there. The children would sleep on the back seats of the floor of the car, and Perry and I would sit in the front. We would alternate driving. Sometimes, and one of us would then be the director, watch the map. We always had our maps from the AAA. Many years later, when Richard and Carol were driving across the country, and Carol was reading the places to go to, and Richard said, "You skipped something because my mother took me to some place right here." On the other hand, just within the last year, Arthur told me that he resented some of those trips because when they came back in August, all the kids on the block would gang up on them because they had all made friends and my children didn't. You never can do the right thing all the time. Analysis of the symphonies, and I really learned a tremendous amount. While I was going to the music school, I saw some girl walking along with something, canvas under her arm, and I said, "Where are you going?" And she said, "I'm going to art school." I said, "Where is that?" She told me it was at the Brooklyn Museum. So Flora and I took ourselves up to the Brooklyn Museum, and we had a lesson in art appreciation and fast sketching. When I came home with my first sketch, in charcoal, and I showed it to the family, and I said, what does this look like? They said, it looks like Mary with Jesus on her lap, the Virgin Mary. And that's what he had shown us. He had shown us a painting of that subject, then explained it to us, and then turned it around and said, sketch it. Of course, Flora wouldn't think of sketching it. I then started going to art school. I went to music school several times a day, a week, and then to art school a few days a week. Then one time he said, there's going to be a Saturday morning class, and he asked me to join it. And so I did. I would come there on Saturday morning, and he would throw a rhyme at us, like Mary had a little lamb, say, sketch it, or Lazy Mary, will you get up, and sketch it. And then I would bring those sketches home and show them to the family, and they would guess what rhyme I had been sketching. Yankee Doodle went uptown. I drew a pony and a Yankee Doodle looking like a good, like Uncle Sam, with a top hat and striped waistcoat. Some of the other girls, who were much younger than I, drew macaroni boxes and called it macaroni. When I did Lazy Mary, will you get up, I drew a window and a girl lying on a cot near the window and a man looking in at the window, saying, if I give you a nice young man with rosy cheeks. So I had a very good time. I spent 3 years with music. I spent 3 years with painting. And then one day, somebody came into the painting class and said something about a sculpture class downstairs. Well, at that time I was trying to paint a face, and I couldn't quite get the bone structure in it. So I said to my painting teacher, I think I'll go to that class. And he said, you go. It's in the morning, and the painting class was in the afternoon. And some other students said, well, they're all filled up. I tried to go, and he said the class was full. And the instructor said, they won't be full for her. They'll take her. And so I started going to the sculpture class. And if you look at some of the sculptures I made, we still have them. The Whitehead was the first thing I did the first week. And he said, you can cast it. And some students said, I've been here for 3 months and you don't let me cast anything. He said, well, she has art in her family. So I had a very good time. I had Anna at home taking care of the children. And I had music, art, and sculpture. It all came under the WPA, and so all my lessons were free. (1933) came along, and with it came Hitler. I thought to myself, the world will never lose a good artist. I must do something about this Hitler business. So I joined the League of Women Voters, and I went out to speak for them. I also went out to do public speaking from sound trucks for the United Nations when they started in 1945. Then I went to Rabbi Halpern, and I said, the Hadassah came to me, and they want me to join Hadassah. And I said, I'm so busy doing other things. He said, well, you stay with the League of Women's Voters because you could do more for us there than you could do for Hadassah. However, I did join Hadassah because the League tried to get in for public speaking to various organizations. And here Hadassah came along with 18 organizations for me to train in public speaking and American affairs. And so I stayed with Hadassah and the League, teaching the American Affairs chairman, 18 of them, one for each of the chapters, about American affairs, public education on every phase of it. And I also